Well, good evening and welcome to the Milligan Leaders in Business Lecture. My name is Destiny Coleman and I am the Administrative Director of the Woltamati Center for Economics, Business, and Entrepreneurship. And tonight I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Robert Milligan. So the Milligan Leaders in Business Lecture Series was created in 1992 through a generous endowment established by Robert Milligan, class of 1922, and his wife Mary. Bill Milligan was a longtime OU trustee and had a distinguished career in the Pure Oil Company, where he became president in 1954 and chairman from 1965 until his retirement in 1971. Since inception, the Milligan Lecture Series has brought many distinguished leaders in business and academia to campus. And now I'd like to introduce you to Justin Brydenbaugh, Associate Professor of Accounting and Faculty Director of the Woltamati Center, for opening remarks.
Thank you, Destiny. I appreciate that. As Destiny mentioned, my name is Justin Brydenbaugh. I serve as the faculty director for the Woltamati Center. I've had the pleasure of taking that role over from Dr. Simon based on her retirement last year. It's been an honor to be in this position and working with the center. The Woltamati Center for Economics, Business, and Entrepreneurship has been in place since 1985. The center offers students a variety of unique opportunities to put theory into practice and learn how business works in the world around them. The center's mission is to enhance academic programs and provide real-world opportunities to create future generations of business and world leaders. Over the past 36 years, it has been the center's pleasure to bring speakers to campus for students and the public to learn from and create an open dialogue to better understand the world around all of us. Before we begin tonight, though, I would like to introduce the president of Ohio Wesleyan University, Rock Jones, to introduce our speaker for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you, Destiny. And it is my pleasure to add my welcome to all of you for this Milligan lecture. It's good to be together in person. I know a lot of our students have chosen to Zoom in rather than just make the walk from the residence hall, but it's so good to be in person. This event was planned 2 years ago, right now, and was in fact one of the first casualties of the pandemic shutdown. So we are thrilled to be able to be back together. I'm going to suggest, we've been keeping our distance from each other for a couple of years, but I think we're vaccinated and we're healthy. Let's kind of come a little closer to the front so our speaker can see the whites of your eyes. I mean, we're going to have a really engaging speaker, and no need to spread out into the back. If folks will be willing to move up a bit, I think that'll be good for us. Thank you. Well, as Destiny indicated, this is the Milligan Lecture, which was endowed by Trustee Robert, better known as Bill Milligan, in 1992. Bill Milligan was an alumnus of Ohio Wesleyan who graduated in 1922, 70 years before he endowed the lecture. He served on our Board of Trustees as either an active or a life trustee for 44 years. He lived to the age of 98. His grandson, John Milligan, is the chair of our Board of Trustees today. And I sent John a note today and said, fun fact, if you live as long as your grandfather, you will be a trustee longer than your grandfather was. So there you go. As Destiny mentioned, Bill Milligan was the longtime CEO of Pure Oil. Here's another fun fact. He was introduced to Pure Oil as a young man by his uncle, an Ohio Wesleyan alumnus, Charles Warren Fairbanks, who had been Vice President of the United States in the administration of Theodore Roosevelt, an Ohio Wesleyan graduate, an ancestor of Bill Milligan and of our current board chair, John Fairbanks, the Fairbanks name again, Milligan. Well, we are thrilled to have this lecture. When Bill Milligan endowed the lecture, he did it with the vision that it would provide an opportunity for our campus to be exposed to outstanding leaders in business and for that exposure to extend to the greater community. And I believe Bill Milligan would be especially thrilled with the selection of tonight's business leader who, like Bill Milligan, has been the leader of a global company. Pete Watson spent 6.5 years as the CEO at Greif, where he has worked for 22 years before on February 1st retiring as the CEO and becoming executive chairman. Greif is a company that operates in more than 40 countries, but for 70 years has made its home right here in Delaware, Ohio. It's one of the great assets of the community in which we are privileged to live and work. Greif has always been known for principled leadership and a commitment to the well-being of all of its associates, regardless of where they are located or the challenges they face. When I met Pete Watson for the first time, I was impressed to be in the company of a corporate leader with a deep commitment to servant leadership and to a culture that values its employees while at the same time returning significant value to its shareholders. As we became better acquainted, I concluded, Pete, that the foundation for your values and leadership, at least in part, rests in your being a product of a liberal arts education. Pete Watson is a graduate of Springfield College in Massachusetts, an institution very much like Ohio Wesleyan. His early career was as a football coach at Cornell and Wake Forest before he moved into the business world. In fact, one of our Voltimati Center donors, Bob Morrill, told me that Pete Watson was his son's position coach on the football team at Wake Forest. What kind of a small world is that? Pete then moved into business, came to Greif in 1999 to the role of CEO in 2015. Pete's a leader in his industry. He served on the boards of the directors of the American Forest and Paper Association and the Fiber Box Association. He's a community leader, serving on the boards of Ohio Health and the Central Ohio American Heart Association. And he's active in the Columbus Partnership and the Ohio Business Council. We have much to learn from Pete Watson, and Pete, it's my pleasure to welcome you as the 2022 Milligan Lecturer.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and Rock, I really appreciate the invitation. And when he first approached me, it was over 2 years ago, as he said. So this is the absolute longest preparation period in my life I've ever had for an event. So I hope I don't disappoint. I'd also appreciate Destiny Coleman and coordinating these activities. They really got to know you well, and so I'm excited. You know, as we talked about, as Rock talked about, been at Greif for 22 years, really just retired as CEO almost 2 months ago, and will serve for years as executive chairman of the board. And today what I'd like to talk about is how Greif's culture of servant leadership not only attracts people to come to work and retain, but also and how we use chairman or servant leadership to drive performance. And there's really three components I want to talk about. One, I want to give you an introduction to Greif, so you understand perspective of who we are, scale, and what we try to do. I want to talk a little bit about the personal influences and experiences I've had in my life. Rock shared a few of them with you, and how that leads my belief that servant leadership is the correct and most effective way to lead. And then really walk you through two things. One, our leadership behavior model, and then also talk about servant leadership, and then how it fits in totality to our strategy in Greif. So bear me with Greif's, we'll be about a $6 billion company this year. We're a global leader in industrial packaging. We're founded in 1877, so we've got a rich history. We've got 16,000 colleagues all around the world. We operate in 43 countries, so we've got a multitude of cultural opportunities. You know, probably 15 to 20 different languages are spoken in our company. We're publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. We've been publicly traded since 1926. We have two different businesses in industrial packaging. We have a rigid industrial packaging business, which is global in nature. We produce and serve our customers steel drums, large plastic containers, small plastic jerry cans, and fiber drums to a who's name of chemical companies, food companies. Again, that's a global footprint. And then we also have a paper packaging business in North America where we have 12 paper mills. We have converting businesses for corrugated and corrugated boxes, industrial tubes and cores. And then we have an interesting growing business in a recycling, refurbishing, recleaning business where we take both rigid packaging and paper packaging and repurpose them, clean the rigid products, clean them, refurbish them, sending them out to our customers. So we have a circular economic model, which is becoming more and more important in sustainability and a big tie-in for our customers. And then the paper business, we have a recycling division where we collect old corrugated boxes and we repurpose that to our mills to make new paper. So we have this virtual cycle in both our businesses that support sustainability, support keeping waste out of landfills, and really creates a tremendous value-added service for our customers. I'd like to share a little bit now, as I talk through servant leadership, what those influences and experience I've had. So I have 2 degrees in education from Springfield College, and a little fact is the soccer coach at Ohio Wesleyan, Jay Martin, who's arguably the best soccer coach in the history of college athletics, is an alumnus of Springfield College. So I hope one day to be as renowned as he, but I don't think I can make it. But so it's been good to see really a lot of high quality people come out of that school and be successful. I'm really proud of what Jay's done in his career. But I didn't take business classes. So what you'll see a lot in my style and influence as a leader is being able to teach and take knowledge and transfer it to other people so they can learn and grow and improve. And I think a big part of teaching is the accountability of that knowledge transfer. So you'll see a lot of that influence in my leadership style. Athletics, so I played college football, I coached college football, and that was really my MBA in leadership. It taught me about accountability, it taught me about caring and being responsible for young men that were 20 people that actually football and academics probably weren't their highest priority, and how to motivate and plan and do all that on a stage where once a week you were on full display and you either won or lost, and you had to deal with that competitiveness. So it was a really great chance for me to learn and hone my skills in business. And again, when you hear me talk, and we've got a few Greif people here, I think they'll see that being a coach is a big part of how I lead. In last business, I came into business when I was 29 years old, and I started at the bottom. I was a sales trainee, went into selling, and so I worked and learned the business from the ground up, which I think is really indicative of what I think is important, because it always starts at the customer. And if you don't understand customers and their needs and markets, I think it's really difficult to lead a business. So those are the influence I have, and I think you'll see that sprinkled through my talk. So what I'd like to do is talk about some high-level components of the leadership and servant leadership. And I think as a CEO or a president of a university, or if you're a student and you're running an extracurricular club, or you're running a fraternity or sorority, or you're an entrepreneur and you have your own business, leaders' first responsibility is to set and establish a strategic direction. And I think there's 3 key components of what that direction looks like. As you can see, it's the purpose, which is the why. It's the vision, which is what's the path and direction we want to take. And last, it's what are your values of your company or your organization or your team. So when you talk about purpose, there's got to be more to leading an organization or a company or a team, what have you, than just winning or just making money. That doesn't last long. You have to get to the hearts and minds of the people on your team. And so our purpose is to safely package and protect our customers' goods and materials so they can serve the essential needs of the communities all around the world. And there was never a time that was more critical than when COVID hit. You saw this dramatic change in how we lived and how we operated, and you saw supply chain disruption, and our team, 16,000 proud, was proud that we were deemed an essential business. We operated throughout the whole global pandemic. We had a couple plants that were down for less than a day, but we operated. We came to work. We operated very effectively, serving the needs of the communities and their essential needs. So packaging chemicals, packaging food, packaging pharmaceuticals. Many times you get from Amazon or e-commerce companies corrugated boxes that come to your door. Well, we might not make that box, but there's a chance we make the raw material that goes in that box. So that is the why for us, and our team is really proud, and there's a purpose why we come to work, much more than just the financial performance. The vision is the direction, and you have to give a really clear path, and this is most critical because this defines how your team works together. And our vision is our direction. It's to be the best performing customer service in the world, period. It's simple, it's direct, it's very lofty in terms of our expectation and standard. But if you talk to any of our colleagues around Greif, everybody understands that's our vision, that's our mission. Everything we do revolves around what we can do to achieve that vision. And that vision is never attainable. It's impossible every single day to be the best serving customer service company in the world. But that's our ambition, it's our aspiration, it's our vision, and that simplifies our activities as a company, and it creates a team working together for one specific vision. And values are about behavior. So when you talk about culture, all culture are the norms and ways and actions that people work together in an organization. It could be a family, it could be a university, it could be a company, it could be a club, a social club. So you got to define what are the values, how are we going to work together? And so I think that's really important because really when you talk about behavior is the leading indicator for leadership. And we'll talk about that a little bit more shortly, but we have a value system called the Greif Way, and it's simply about treat people with respect and dignity, all your stakeholders, work together. It's about embracing diversity, and we're a very diverse company with very diverse regions that we work in. It's being committed to the idea of sustainability. How do you create a path to a zero carbon future? And how do you create innovation to enhance the circular business economy? And then last, it's about the relentless pursuit of continuous improvement in how we serve our customers. And that's our value system, the Greif Way. I could talk for a whole semester on that, but that's really so our purpose, our vision, and our values are really understood. And I think that's our litmus test on how we behave and how we lead and how we operate our business. The second is when you build this culture, and the culture really, if we label it, it's the Greif Way or the servant leadership, is really three components: leadership, culture, and performance. The leadership is about the behaviors that we talked about, but we are very specific about what those leadership models look like and what those behaviors look like. And I'm a big believer in you can learn 3 or 4 things at one time. That's your comprehension level. And maybe just because I'm not that smart, we have a lot more smarter people in the company. We got a good young man there that's brilliant off the charts, so he can learn more. But I'm a believer you keep things simple. So the most we do is 4. You'll see a lot of 3s, but we have a specific model. We don't want people to interpret their view of what these leadership behaviors are. We specifically spell it out, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Culture, we talked about, is how we work together, right? It's the norms, it's the values we have. And again, we spell that out in our culture. It's the values of the Greif Way. It's working together as a team. And I don't know of any organization, social, academic, healthcare, industrial business, consumer business, where one person by themselves can lead an organization to victory. It takes a group of people working together, all have different roles, all have different responsibilities, but teams, individuals together have to work toward a common path, which is that vision. So we talk a lot about teamwork, and last is about the service mindset. Comes back to what I learned as a sales trainee and a seller, is you have to keep your customer first, and everything needs to be driven around your customer, their needs, not their wants, and we'll talk about that specifically. But I think what's important is we focus more on leadership and culture, and the reason we do that is because if you get that, that's like our process, the common process we do business. If you get those two right, if you get people working together, their behaviors as leaders are aligned, they're working together as a team and a culture to serve your customers' needs, the performance takes care of itself. It just does. We spend less time about talking about what that number we have to hit, although we're very metric driven, but talk about, hey, what are the three things that drives performance? And they're the exact same three things that drive culture and leadership. It's about having a common system or a process, how we work. We call it the Greif Business System. So we don't want people doing all these different things. We have a way to do our work. And we have what we call execution discipline. You can work every single day and be consistent, but it's really hard every day to show up and have the discipline to execute and do the right thing every single hour, every single shift in a manufacturing site, every single day, every single week, every single month, over and over and over again. And execution discipline is about doing the fundamentals of your business the right way all the time. And that seems very simple to say. It's really difficult to do. And we spend a lot of time talking about that. And quite frankly, the leadership behaviors and the culture embed us and allow us to be successful. And then accountability. So accountability for leadership is not about, Tom, you need to do this. Here's your number. Go do it. Accountability and leadership is about being responsible to help your team be successful. Give them the tools, give them the training, give them the education, give them the motivation, and you are responsible as a leader for the accountability of your teams. And I think that's one of the big components of servant leadership. And when you really look about it, if you get the culture right, culture always precedes performance. So you don't get this culture if all of a sudden you have a success, right? If you're a sports team, you win the Super Bowl. If you're an academic institution, you win a lot of awards and you're recognized. If you hit your numbers in business, that doesn't create a culture. Your culture happens well before you're successful. So that's why we spend a lot of time on leadership and culture, because I'm a big believer if you get that right, the performance takes care of itself. So let's talk a little bit more in depth. We're going to take it down one level, and we're going to talk about our leadership behavior model, and then we'll talk about some of the attributes of servant leadership. So this is one of the few things we talk about that are in fours. So this is my exception. What we talk about is as a leader, we have 16,000 leaders in the company, right? Every single colleague in Greif should be a leader. And it's not your position, it's not your title, it's not how long you've been at the company. Leadership's determined by how you behave, how you act, how you work together as a team, how you respond to challenges, good and bad. And so that's what we try to preach, that, hey, here's the roadmap for good leadership, and regardless of the job you have, you can be an effective leader. And that's a big part of our training. We have something called the Greif University, which is our training enabler. And so we talk about it, and I'll go through it. So first, we talk about teamwork as a big part of our culture. We got to think about Greif first. Sometimes we have to do something in the best interest of the whole company that maybe is not as optimal for an individual or a small group, but you have to make sacrifices. Everything we do has to drive the highest performance level for the whole company. And again, we talk about individuals are great as long as individuals work as part of the team. If you have a high-performing individual that's a cowboy and wants to work outside the parameters, that works for a while, but that eventually erodes the value of the team, and that's not acceptable. So we also incent everybody in the company some portion to 100% of the performance of Greif. And that's really important. A leadership team, I can't have our paper packaging business get 100% of his compensation and rewards based on his business, because what's that going to lead their behavior to? I'm just going to worry about paper packaging. I don't care about the rest of life. So it's an important part of it. You have to reward both financially and non-financial measures, recognition to what we do as a team, because we win as a team and we lose as a team. Second is about communication, and that's listening first, speaking second. And we talk about communicate with respect, with candor and trust. So respect goes back to the Greif way. You have to treat people like you want to be treated. You may have a disagreement with somebody, and it's your right to speak up. It's your right to dissent. That's where candor comes in. But you better do it with respect, and you better not do it personally. You better do it with the realm that, hey, I'm being challenging to you because I think we can do this a better way. Or I think the behavior of your team is offline, and we need to get in line. And then you have to, if you do that enough, you can develop trust and personal relationship. Now, that's really easy for me to stand up here and say, that's what we do. Are we perfect in that? Absolutely not. That is a really hard concept to practice, because it is not normal for people to challenge and have conflict. People in general don't like conflict. It's too easy to ignore it. But it's really important. If you want to be a high-performing team, if you want a culture that's driven around respect of people, be candid in what we're saying. Now, candor drives around the vision, and what do we got to do the best performing customer service in the world? But if it's candor because I'm attacking you, or I'm criticizing you or ridiculing you, that's not accepted. That's counter to teamwork. And then over time, you build trust. And trust is an interesting thing. It takes forever to get trust, and it takes one interaction to lose it. Right? And so we're all humans, and we make mistakes, and we erode trust with each other, with our customers, with our investors. And how do you respond to that? You admit that you were wrong, and you start back to every single interaction, building that trust and respect. Third is about acting with the mindset of a champion. That's really simply saying, okay, you can find a reason why you're going to be successful in anything you do. Or you can explain why you weren't. So my wife Linda has given me duties to clean the garage this weekend. She's going away. And when she comes back, she expects the garage to be cleaned. I could probably come up with 100 reasons why. NCAA tournament watch, my friends invited me out. I can explain it away, but ultimately you have to find ways to be successful and win. And it could be as easy as, hey, today I'm going to work safely. And I'm not going to have excuses on why I didn't. And back to this, we're not perfect human beings, no one is. So when you don't succeed, how do you respond? Do you respond, oh, I'm going to explain all the reasons why. The economic situation is bad. COVID has destroyed demand in our market. We have to work differently. It's really hard. We really don't care. What we care about is working together to achieve results. And if we don't do it the first time, the attitude and the culture is, what do we have to do to respond and come back together and think through this? How can we be successful? And again, we fail every day. Everybody fails every day. You want to win more than you fail. And it's that mindset of how you respond to failure. And it's not okay to fail, but if you don't learn from it, you don't respond from it, then that's really bad. So we talk about acting with the mindset of a champion. And then last, it's model the behaviors of a servant leader. I'm going to talk about servant leader attributes, but really this modeling is important. As a leader and as the CEO and president before I retired, you're on stage. Everything I said and every action I took was in a microscope. And if I didn't follow these principles and didn't behave like a servant leader, what do you think happens? There's a buzz that goes around from Asia to the U.S. to Europe, and I'll guarantee it happens, right? And so even if you're anybody in the company, you have to model the behaviors. You can talk about behaviors, but people watch what you do. It's less about blah, 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 and it's more about what are you doing. And so that's a challenge. That's part of that execution discipline. Keep it simple, but model your behavior as a leader as you want your team to do. So let's just talk about some of these behaviors. If you read a book, and probably the best book I've ever read in my life is the simplest book to read. It's called The Servant by James C. Hunter. It was written about 30 years ago. My first boss, as I was running a manufacturing plant, gave it to me and said, this is a great lesson for a young man to learn how to be a leader. It's about servant leader. When I read it, I didn't learn anything new from the book. The concepts weren't new, but the application to a real life story was phenomenal. And so I read it, don't read it every year cover to cover, but I have it dog-eared and I highlight it and I refer to it all the time because things come up and I remember back in the book and it helps adjust my center to being a servant. And we gave it to everybody in the company. It comes in different languages, translated, and it's really a simple way to understand the concept. So if you want it, you can either send me a text or an email and I'll get it for you, or you can go online and probably for $13 you can order it. But it's a phenomenal book. It's simple, it's direct to the point. So that's my introduction to servant leader. Really 3 components, and there's 15 or 20 ways you can describe servant leadership. This is what I think is important. Starts with humility. So as a leader, it is not about you. Trust me, as a CEO, it is not about me. It's about the people I serve. And if you have a leader, and I don't care if it's a small group in a manufacturing plant, or a leader of a division, or a plant manager, or a department manager, if it's all about you, how fast will they turn you off in a New York second? It's not about you. It's about what you can do to serve those that you lead. And it comes back to this customer mindset. You're there to serve the customer. And our customers are internal colleagues and external colleagues. And it's a certain, very important part of it. Second is you got to value people. You got to develop relationships with people. And that's showing care. So if I walk in a plant or a plant manager doesn't know the names of every single person on that floor and something about their family, their wife, their kids, what's going on in their life, that's not good. You need to demonstrate you care, and you do that by talking to them and learning. And don't talk to them about business. Talk about who they are, what they're going through in life, what their interests are. And it's amazing what you can learn. And what you find out is you got some really incredibly talented, ambitious people in a company or an organization, and you don't know that until you ask, until you interact with them. That's the first step to showing you care. And the longer you do that, and the more you do that, you develop trust. And it comes back to what we said before. Every single interaction with a colleague or a customer builds or destroys trust. And so it's something really important to do. You have to know your people and spend time and where they truly understand that you care for them. And then if you do that over time, you build trust. And when you have care and trust, that creates love. And love is a funny word to use in a business setting, but that's the ultimate, beyond trust. When you get that love or that emotional attachment, people want to go above and beyond their responsibility to be successful. They'll do more than you think they can do because they care about the team, they trust the team, and there becomes that love. And it's an odd thing to talk about in business world, but it's true. So it's about developing relationships, you're showing people you care. And the other thing is when you have 16,000 people from different walks of life, different languages, it's important to recommend, it's not only in Greif, it's everywhere. Champions or winners, successful people come in all sorts of varieties. So look in Greif. So we have very intellectually great speakers that can orate, wonderfully. And we have someone from Europe who speaks 4 languages, and English might be their 4th language. And maybe they're not as eloquent, but what they say is really impactful. So just because one is not as eloquent in English as one that is, doesn't mean they're any different. And you have to identify champions and winners and leaders of all kinds. You've got very quiet, introverted people in our company that are brilliant. You've got extroverts that are dynamic. It doesn't mean one's a better leader, one's more successful than the other. So I think it's really important as a leader to understand and really get behind, what they're made up of, and watch how they behave and watch their past history and their future is because successful people have a track record of being successful from whatever they do. We had a young man from Vietnam that was an Ohio State grad, sorry, Rock, but we have Ohio Wesleyan, trainees as well. But he was a quiet guy, didn't talk, and we didn't know what he was doing. And he came up in like 40 minutes with a solution to a back office problem that took us 2 days to finish. And he reduced it to 45 minutes. He didn't say anything. We didn't know. We thought he was going to leave. We didn't think he liked it. And so what an incredible talent. No one would have taken the time to know him. And so you've got to find excellence in leadership in a variety of people that you run across. Just because someone's quiet doesn't necessarily mean they're not the best leader. And if somebody is very extroverted and appears to be a leader, they may or may not be. Look at their behaviors, look at their success rate, and try to identify who they are. And finally, serving needs. We talked about being relentless about serving your needs of the customer. And we talk about needs, not wants, right? Customers want a really low price, don't they? Customers want you to carry 60 days of inventory just in case they make a mistake. Customers don't want to pay you for 120 days. That's what they want. Do they need that? Somebody says, I want 60 days of inventory. What do you really need? I just need to make sure that within 2 days' time, you can promise me you'll get deliveries. That doesn't have anything to do with the amount of inventory you hold. It means it's behavior, what you need for us to serve, your needs of your company. So internally, I need a bigger office. I want a bigger office. Do you really need it? So you can have a million examples. We focus on needs, not wants, because sometimes they're the same, many times they're different. And when we talk about customers, their internal customers, our colleagues, we have to serve their needs, because if we serve our colleagues' needs, what do? They serve our external customer needs. And you got to get the first part right before you have a chance to be good on the second part. And we talked about accountability aligned to value creation. Every activity we do in the company has to be driven, how are we creating value for our people, for our customers, and our investors? It's pretty simple. Colin Powell had a great quote, and I'll read it, you can see it, but leaders exist to give people what they need to accomplish their goals. Pretty simple, isn't it? I think that's as good of explanation what servant leadership is. And as a leader of an organization, you have to drive that home every day. There's no sense of entitlement. There's no special feeling to be in the top of an org chart. Having a fancy title is not that big a deal. We don't really get too excited about titles, but it's leaders demonstrated successfully if they give their people that they're what they need to get the job, and they're accountable for doing that. So now what I'd like to do is just pull all this together. So we talked about these in pieces. Let me pull it all together. This is our purpose. We talked about what our purpose is, and we show this. Now, this is a little old school for me. I like things very orderly. Our new CEO is a little younger, more creative, and it looks different. So you'll see I took both ends. But we have a purpose, and we talk about this when we have meetings. Here's what we're trying to do. We continue to reference our vision, so everybody in our company can talk about our purpose and vision. And what you want to do is make sure that people know, regardless of the job, if they're in Singapore, if they're a fork truck driver, if they're a customer service manager in the Netherlands, if they're a machine operator in Brazil, or if they're a salesperson in the U.S., whatever job they have, I have a place in the purpose and the vision, and I can help us get there as part of a team. I think it's really important for people to understand, what role do I play? What can I affect? How can I positively impact and make our company better toward these goals? And that builds self-esteem, and it builds pride, and it's a chain that's virtuous. We didn't talk much about strategies, but I think when you talk about these 4 strategies, they're all part of servant leadership. We talk about creating thriving communities. It's about keeping our people safe, and not only at work, is teaching how do we create safety at home, and try to educate and drive safe behavior at home and at work. It's about an engagement culture, so we use Gallup who are brilliant in terms of engagement surveys. They use us, we use them to help us with engagement activities and how we work together as a team. Right now, we're in the top decile of all the companies they use. And it's just a way to get small groups together, pick one thing we can do to act better as a team. And they have tons of data and analytics that they help us with. But it's a very simple approach, but it's a way for us to measure empirically, are we getting better as a team or not? And last, it's about diversity and embracing diversity. We have a very diverse company based on our footprint and our culture, but we need to get better from a diversity standpoint in gender and race in the U.S. So we've got goals set up, and it's a big part of our culture, how to advance that and improve the diversity of our company. Second is about delivering legendary customer service. It's pretty simple. We've got a really good plan, specific plan. We measure it like crazy, but it's about focus on being differentiated in what we serve to customers, so customers will give us more business, and it gives us a leverage on price. Again, we could talk about this for a whole semester, but it's as simple as that. There's a lot of detail behind it, and that's both internal customers and external customers. We measure both of those. And what we do is when we don't have a good score, we want to know why and what we can do to get better. If we're really good, it gives us an opportunity to find out how we can get better. Protecting our future is about sustainability. It's a core element of the Greif Way. It's about creating a path to zero carbon in manufacturing. Again, that's really easy to say. It's hard to do. We have a really commitment and a path to get there. It'll take a long time. But the other part of that, how do we innovate products and services to our customers to aid in the circular business model? And we talked about that, collecting steel drums, plastic drums, cleaning, refurbishing them, selling them to other customers, recycling all the corrugated, putting them back in refurnished to make new products at our mills. Because what we have to eventually do is, we've got a goal on zero waste to landfill. And what we want to do is everything that can be put in a landfill coming from our facilities, our offices, we want to eliminate it. And we want to reuse. So this notion in the Greif Way and our core values about sustainability is live. We measure it. And Ole is very passionate about this. He led our global sustainability efforts for before he became CEO. So it's a big part. One, our people demand it. People don't want to work for somebody that's not environmentally conscious. Right? Our customers demand it because it's good business, and they have goals to meet, and you have to help them. That's part of legendary customer service. And our investment community demands it too. There'll be a time, it's coming soon, and some investors will not invest in your company if you don't have a good record on sustainability. And this financial disclosures around the environment is becoming more and more important. That's going to become, just like any auditing financial disclosures, it's going to be part of that. We're in really good shape. We've reported on those environmental disclosures for climate disclosures for the last 2 years. So we're not perfect, but we're on the path, and I think we're in pretty good shape. And finally, ensuring financial strength. This is about driving cash, meeting the performance commitments we say. So if we tell the street and we tell our investors as a public company, we're going to achieve this much cash flow and this much earnings per share, we have to do it. That's a commitment. We don't say it's a goal. We say it's a commitment. And part of this teamwork and leadership drives to meeting the commitment we give to the people who own our business. And it's an important distinction, because if we don't, we have trouble investing back in the business. So anyway, and then the bottom is the foundation. It's the Greif Way we talked about. It's how you treat people inside the company, outside. It's about embracing diversity. It's about a commitment to sustainability. It's a relentless pursuit of continuous improvement in behavior and serving customers inside and outside. So kind of painted the small components, saw the big picture. These are just my lessons learned. They're not necessarily perfect. I don't expect you to say, wow, this is great. But if this is things that I think that I've taken away that are good. One, we talk about culture. Leaders must own the culture. You can't abdicate it. You can't delegate culture, because culture, in my view, is what drives the foundation for success. And so as a leader, you have to determine what that desired culture is. You have to spend time around it. You have to communicate it. When we traveled before COVID, I spent 70% of my time traveling around the world to all of our over 200 organizations and companies, and we talked about the culture, and we talked about that vision and about the strategies and the Greif way and leadership behavior. It's really important. Don't expect you to put it up on a PowerPoint and people to understand, got it, boss. Pete, we got it. Ole, clear. Human beings don't act that way. Repetition on things that are important are really critical. That kind of comes back to that teaching model we talked about. Coaching is all about repetition, practicing to do it right all the time, and it's no different in business. You got to build a team culture as part of that, and then as we talked about, culture precedes success. Culture is not a byproduct of success. Sometimes it can be for a very limited period. Sustainable success is driven by having a foundation culture. Lead with the customer as a starting point. Identify the customer. You got internal customers. You have customers inside the company. In a manufacturing plant, there's a raw material supply flow. Every step of that flow, you have a customer and a provider. And they may be the same company, and they may be buddies, and you may go drink beer with them, you may do things as a family. But if you don't serve that person in that supply chain as a customer, then you risk the ability to ultimately serve the customer in the very best way we can. If you have treasury and finance working together, there's times that finance has to provide data to treasury so they can do their job. There's some times where treasury has to provide finance with. And if they bicker because they're in the same department and don't treat each other like customers, that's suicide. It degrades your culture. Who's the customer? What do they need? Not what do they want. Internally, I want this today. Well, when do you need it? 2 weeks from now. I promise you'll get it when you need it, right? Then it comes customers. It's find out what their needs are, not their wants, and be relentless about serving them. So everything we do is customer in mind, what their needs are. We talked about this execution discipline, and you could have a great culture and feel good and attract a lot of people to work and have this trust and respect and care about the family and be great serving the customers, you think so, but if that can't translate into meeting your commitments and winning, then that culture hasn't really given you what you need. And it comes back to execution discipline. You got to do it the right way every single moment of every single day of every single week of every single month, year after year after year. It's a grind, but that's how success comes. Success isn't because I want to win the Super Bowl. It's because I want to put in the time every single day for 365 days of the year and do the right things the right way so I'm prepared when I have the chance we're going to be successful. That's taking a culture, embedding execution discipline in to give you a chance to win. And last is I think from an academic standpoint, you've got to be a lifelong learner. I don't care if you're 5 in kindergarten or you're like me, 65 years old. Just because I'm retiring does not mean I can't be a lifelong learner. Because the minute you stop learning, you die, right? You don't get better. You get better or worse every day by your actions. And being a lifelong learner, read. You've got tremendous access on the internet, podcasts, TED Talks. There's tremendous information, more than we've ever had in our lifetime to learn things. And what we talk about is, hey, have a goal in what you're going to learn. Once a month, learn something. Go out of your comfort zone and learn. And it's no different if you're an academic institution. You're here to, I'm sure a lot of students, hey, you got social interaction, right? That's fun. But you got to prepare yourself to be successful in the future, and you got to learn. You got to commit and be accountable to yourself. I'm going to learn. And some things you might take classes, some things you might take books. Say, I'm not sure I'll ever use this. And trust me, I had that. But the fact that you learn how to read and comprehend and think critically, regardless of the topic, will create great success for you in the future. So be a lifelong learner, and it gives you a chance to be successful whether you're 5 or 65. So that's what I have. I hope that was helpful. I hope that provided some insight. And love to open it up for Q&A. If anybody has it, feel free to ask anything you want.
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate it. Dusty and I will be walking around, in which we both have mics. If anybody does have a question, feel free to raise your hand, in which we're happy to come over to you, hold the mic, allow you to ask your question. Please ask it in a succinct manner so we can move through as many questions as possible. But other than that, we're happy to open up to questions.
I come down here. I hate standing behind a lectern, but I didn't want to look up there and keep turning my back. Yes, sir. What's your name? Sharu.
So was servant leadership a model you became aware of when you came to Greif, or was that something you kind of brought with you?
You know, so Greif was the largest shareholder, majority shareholder in Greif is a family called the Dempsey family. Their foundation is here in Delaware. Their grandfather, the current large shareholder, their grandfather was CEO for 46 years. He didn't talk about servant leadership. He lived servant leadership. So the Greif way was driven by the successor CEO, Mike Gasser, and he articulated how Mr. Dempsey operated. So it's been part of the culture and fabric of Greif for a long time. All I did is because I read that book, Servant 30 years ago, I just started articulating that. And we emphasized it and we expanded on it. But this has been part of the Dempsey culture and family that is really, who we are as a company and our largest shareholders. So, but I think you can always get better and you adapt. The world changes around you and you have to adapt and learn. So I think we do that and pretty effectively. And we're far from perfect. Let me tell you something. Far from perfect, but it's an aspiration to drive to every day. And that's the whole thing about relentless pursuit of improvement. And hold yourself accountable to behavior. You heard that already, didn't you?
Pete, there's young people here.
Yep.
Is there something as they come into, from a servant leadership standpoint, that different traits or something that you see in a person, or is it something you feel more servant leadership is learned, or is it there when they get there?
I mean, that's that old adage, is it instinctive or you're born with it or you learn from it? My belief is some people have advanced leadership abilities just because of their experiences in life, but I think you always can learn and improve. And I've seen a lot of people that were very introverted that you said there's no way they can be a leader, and they're phenomenal leaders in their own way. So I think you got to learn how to be a leader, and I think, what are the behaviors that, we talk about 4 behaviors, and they're not the only ones. Find those behaviors that you believe as a young person that's meaningful and you can embrace and it's part of who you are and practice it. And I think the other thing is, you guys are undergrads, so you might say, I can't be a leader, I'm an undergrad here. You got the president of the university, right? You can be a leader if you decide to be the leader, right? If you decide to get involved in something, if you decide to make a difference. And you learn from the people that you're part of. So I look for people that want to go out, they want to learn, they want to get involved, and they're passionate about whatever they're doing. So if you're involved in a club or you're involved in sustainability or environment here, or if you're in a debate club or athletics, whatever, a social club, an academic club, be passionate about it, because when you're passionate, you get recognized, right? And when I talk about, I look for people that have success traits in their background. And it's not just academics, Somebody could have a 3.0 or 2.5 GPA, but if they put themselves through college, their parents, went through a severe illness that distracted them, what else are they doing? They're putting themselves through school. They work 3rd shift, went to school, and they're involved in service activities. Look for what they've done. If we're hiring people, I don't necessarily care where they went to school, although I'm not diminishing it, but I want to see what have they accomplished in their life. Outside of work, inside of work, have they been in leading positions? That's an indicator for success inside our company. And so don't wait. You can be a leader right now if you believe you're a leader, and believe you should be. You're a leader. You just got to demonstrate it. Get involved in something, be passionate about something, and go after it. And you'll learn from it. And you'll make mistakes, but that's okay. Get up off the ground and ask what we can do better and go from there. And it's the same thing, young person, I tell my kids are in their 30s, and my wife tells me that all the time. If I commit an unsafe act, she reminds me about what I preach. And so we're all learning. That's that lifelong learning. And I think you'll learn to be a leader. And the more effective you can be, it gives you opportunities in life. You're all going to have a family one day. As a family, man and wife, you're leading, right? Yeah, husband or spouses, you have to lead your kids. That's a pretty important job. So, anyway. Does that answer it, Tom?
Hello,
Hi.
my name's Catherine. I'm a first year here. I was just wondering if you had one piece of advice to give to somebody who's interested in becoming a leader, what would you give them?
Be a lifelong learner. Study it. You can read, but you can also watch. President Jones and I were talking at dinner, is I watch a lot of coaches, partly because it's my background, to learn how they respond to different circumstances as a leader. When they win, how do they respond? Are they humble? Are they, cocky and arrogant? When they lose, do they blame others or they take responsibility? How do they respond? You see that in politics, how governments respond. You see in business, you can get all these podcasts you can watch and model leaders, and that's part of learning. So I would be a student of leadership and observe it. You've got a wonderful president who you can watch and learn from. You probably can sit down and have a cup of coffee with them, and I'm sure that's daunting to be a freshman to go up to the president, but go to leaders at the university, have a cup of coffee, and talk about one concept of leadership so you can learn. You've got some brilliant people here, great leaders. Find out who they are and spend time with them and learn. And then, like I said before, get involved in something and you got a chance to be a leader. Volunteer to lead some activity. And no better way to learn than to do. Hope that helps. Hope I didn't commit your 73 people are going to ask you for coffee.
Hey, Pete. Justin Skaggs, class of '09, trying to be a lifelong learner. I'm curious, so servant leadership for me has been easy when things go well. When things get hard or contentious, it's sometimes harder to keep that momentum. So what advice would you have in that scenario?
Yeah, I think it comes back to team, right? Servant leaders are accountable for the team, and they're accountable to provide resources and needs so the team can do well. And I think character comes out when you fail, right? It's how do you respond to failure. If you blame people, your team disintegrates, right? And you lose it. I think you focus not on the person, you focus on the process for failure, right? What happened? What are we learning from that? As a team, what can we do better? So a lot of times, 2 or 3 people might feel that they're responsible, but it's all about the process. What happened? What did we learn, and what are we going to do together? What can I do to help you so we can be successful next time? So I just think it's reverting back to that mindset of you're there to serve the needs, and it's not about me, it's not about you, it's not about the leader, it's about the team. And that's really easy to say, and that's really hard to do, isn't it? This execution discipline we talked about, really easy for me to say every single day. We've got to do things right, repeat it. It gets boring. It does. But that's how you win. There's not a magic formula for leadership. There's not a magic formula for being successful. A lot of it's hard work, it's attitude, and it's the ability to respond to success, with humility, and respond to disruption, respond to failure as a team. Not point fingers, but focus on the process. Probably a longer answer than you wanted, but I can't help myself. Now that I'm retired, I don't get a chance to speak as much, so. Yes, sir.
Question for you in regards to success and being humble about it, but also being able to tell the story. Greif has water packs, for example, in countries that are very limited in water sources. A great program. How do you tell that success as a leader and announce that, as one would say, to the public and make sure that they know it, but also do it in a humble fashion?
I think there's a difference between personal humility and using success to recognize people and make people feel good. And part of our customer base, external, is investors, right? You want to convince them, hey, you need to invest in us. So I think you need to promote the accomplishments, and that's different than feeling, hey, I'm a leader, it's about me. And when you do that, it's not about me. Hey, look what our team did on water backpacks, or look what our treasury team did to drive our tax rate down 10 basis points. Look what we just earned 50% share in a new customer. Look what our commercial operations team did together to get that. So it's bragging on your people, and not necessarily the leader. So I think a good lesson and a good indicator is when something goes well and the leader takes responsibility, it's a bad sign. You give praise to your team. We did it together. You guys did it. When your failures come, I failed. It's my responsibility. So it's how you respond to that. And I got to tell you, Greif is a very humble company. It has been for a long time. I think one thing we can do better is promote our success much better, because if we don't, no one else will. And Ole Rosgaard is a much better marketing mindset. He's a very humble man, but he's a much better marketer and promoter than I am. And so I think that's a really positive. He's got both of those skill sets, and I hope you'll see more of that. But we've been recognized by a lot of things, but a lot of, on sustainability, on engagement. Newsweek said we're one of the top 100 loved companies in the U.S. We've hit our numbers 15 straight quarters. Done a lot of good, but we can do a better job from an investor standpoint, letting them know. So, it's a balance. Yep.
I'll ask a question real quick, Pete. You mentioned earlier about this idea of serving people's needs and not just their wants. What have you learned in terms of figuring out what people's needs really are? Because I find sometimes people maybe a hard time figuring out what that is. They know what they want, but not always what their need is exactly.
I think let's just take customers, for example. I think you have to ask and engage and with people face to face, right? But also you need to study the customer's customer needs, right? And the internet gives you tremendous access to do that. If you understand the customer's customer needs, what the trends are for your customer's customer, that can help precipitate a conversation at a much higher level with your customer to brainstorm things. And sometimes customers, they're very myopic. They know just what they want. So you got to get to a different level in the organization. Get to the CEO. Get to the marketing people. Get to an operation plant manager. If you talk to purchasing people, what's their job? Drive their price down. If you talk to marketing people, how can the package help market the product? You're creating value and you're helping the customer. If the CEO's driving sustainability, we can create a circular economic model for you and create a lot of value. And you've changed the conversation from price to value, and it gets you in a different sphere of contacts within the customer that can get at a higher level strategic conversation. But you can't get there unless you do the fundamentals, serving their needs, quality, on-time delivery really well all the time, because you don't have any credibility to talk to them about strategic things. And the same thing with people. You've got somebody internally you got to serve. You better get to know what their needs are. Tell me about your job, what you're doing. What are your pain points? It's no different. It's selling. It's just trying to, they're not going to tell you right away. Take some time. You got to learn, and you got to be relentless about doing that.
Any other questions anybody has? Feel free to raise your hand.
Sir.
So, when you're starting an organization, starting a business, what advice do you have other than obviously modeling servant leadership as a founder? What advice would you give as far as making sure at that early stage where maybe at one point you're the only person in the organization, how to make sure that servant leadership permeates the culture from early on? Because it's one thing when a new employee is entering and you've got 200 employees or 2,000 employees and they're kind of like a drop in the bucket, but early on each employee changes the
Well, it's got a real, entrepreneur, startup a business. I think there's two things. Whoever your team is, they're gonna model their behavior after the founder, and you got to define what that is with a small team. But I think when you're starting a business, the most important thing is about, do you have a product or a service, the value proposition that you got a chance to survive out of the gate, right? Because it's different from an established company. But if you're a leader starting a business, you better make sure you got a value proposition. You can sell product, and you can get paid well, and you can survive in cash flow. But at the same time, how you behave, your leadership behavior, is part of what molds that team. I think those are two things you got to consider. You're going to role model. I don't think you have to tell everybody. I don't think it's easy as having a 10-point power presentation. It's just, hey, here's what we're going to try to do. We're going to treat you with respect. If you with 5 people you don't see it happening, you call someone out. So they're going to model your behavior, and if you behave that way, then you've created the culture. But if you're going to start a business, you better make sure your product, service, the value proposition, that you got a chance to win and get paid, and just the fundamentals. And then you grow from there. So does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Do you think it's harder at that early stage because like you're kind of treading water, like you said. So you said a number of times that success doesn't bring culture, but culture precedes success.
Yep.
So is it kind of difficult at that time where you're telling everyone like, guys, we got to make it to next week, we got to make it to next month, for them not to cut corners as far as what you're not willing to sacrifice with the culture?
Yeah, so I think at a big company, 16,000 people, $6 billion, I think it's much easier than starting a business. Now, so I've got to make sure I communicate what we talked about, 16,000 people all the time. But starting a business is a lot harder. If you say, I'm going to start a business, whatever it is, 2 or 3 people, or just by yourself, you have a much harder job than I do. Really, honest to God. I've run a small business. You have to do everything. You turn around, I have no one to delegate to. You do it, so you do everything. And then what you have to do as that founder and leader is your behavior when things go sideways, and they will. My God, are we going to have enough cash to last next week? Do we got to go to the bank? Do we have to just not pay our vendors? Those are all the conundrums you run into. How do you do that? You talk to a vendor, I need an extra 30 days, and here's why. And you talk through it and you explain it. You're demonstrating good leadership, right? If somebody say, if we cut this corner on this product, we can save 10%, we can drive that money. That's probably not a behavior you want as a founder. So it's more about how you behave and how you interact through that beginning that'll create the culture. And it could be bad, it could be good. But starting a company is a lot harder than running a $6 billion business, trust me. It is. Different skill sets. I could not do a really good job starting. I just don't think that's my skill set. So if you can do that, bless you, and you got a lot of people here that can help you. The gentleman right there's got his own business started from scratch. So I've seen him go through it. So anyway, does that help answer? Yep.
I have a question. Lots of our students do take internships in a company like yours.
Yep.
So what kind of advice can you give them once they start a summer internship? What should they do? What should they focus on? Who should they mimic? What are some steps that some advice they can take from you?
Yeah, you want to comment on that? Stand up and introduce yourself, and why don't you answer that, and then I'll comment. Introduce yourself. He's a really bright, talented young man.
I'm Dan Tettleman. I work for Greif, actually. Been here a few years, so.
Got a nice promotion to strategy and investor relations?
Yep, but I'm here just, lifelong learner. Got a thing or two to still learn from Pete, but so your question was what advice would you have for for students as they enter into an internship?
Because you were an intern starting, weren't you? No?
No, I didn't intern at Greif, but I started my career as an intern. And my biggest advice would just be to model what you see in the role models that become apparent to you early in your career. So I think most people intuitively can tell early on in their career who the type of leader they want to follow is. And, you know, you can see it here today with me and Pete, right? I see Pete as someone in my career that I can continue to grow from, and I'm, as we mentioned, you know, a little bit past the internship stage now, but if you have kind of a North Star of that role model of the servant leader that you want to be, I think just following that can kind of get you jump-started in your career.
Thanks, Dan. Hate to put you on the spot, but we do that quite a bit at Grafe, don't we? Good leader, good young leader. The other thing is, you know, get involved. Don't sit there and say, I'm only an intern. And we tell our interns that, hey, you're a leader, and here's what we expect out of a leader. We expect you to make an impact. Find one thing you can do to make us better and challenge us to get better. These interns are really, really bright young people. We've had several interns at from Ohio Wesleyan, and we've hired some. And that's the first start. We talked about leadership. How can I, as a student, become a leader? Get involved and make an impact, right? Try to solve a problem. You know, make a difference every day. Don't just sit there and say, I'm going to be meek and I'm going to learn. Go out there and make a difference and try to. Now, some cultures might not allow that, so I would reference, find a internship program that you think fits the culture for you as a person. And so, I don't know if that helps. But if you know, Bala Satya Narayanan is our CHRO, and Tara Plazer is our talent development. So if you have people that you'd like to be considered, we're right here. It's a real benefit to have Ohio Wesleyan and Ohio State, you know, interns in here. I mean, it's a great asset, and we've got some really great people from Ohio Wesleyan, and we need more. So if you want, I can give you that information afterwards. Oh, you're going to put me on the spot.
Put me on the spot, so I'm putting you back on the spot now. So one of the challenges that I've found in my career thus far, you know, following the model of the servant leader the last few years, is when you start to realize that there's a lot of different types of customers out there that you're serving, you then start to realize that sometimes their needs are directly opposite of each other. So how do you prioritize when you have important customers that's needs are diametrically opposed, you know, tackling which needs to fill?
Are you talking about external customers, internal customers, or anything?
Both, right? There's times where the needs of our internal people might need to be sacrificed in the short term to serve the greater need of the external customer, or, you know, the external end user customer versus the stakeholder. It can get challenging.
And it comes back to, you know, what's our purpose and vision, right? If you keep everything focused on that. And then you have to prioritize on, you know, the activities you sometimes, and we're bad about this, is we have all these activities going, and they're all great in their own mind, but we don't have the wherewithal to do them all. So you got to prioritize and make things simpler. And that sometimes is what happens, right? Internally, we got all these good projects. And as leaders, you have to define and help people know these are the ones that have the highest priority. And external customers, you know, they have violently different needs. You have to make sure you're capable of meeting the needs of the customer. If you're not, you're probably never going to be successful, and all you do is create frustration. So not every customer is a good customer. And I'm not saying it's because they don't pay or they're bad people, but sometimes we don't have the capability to meet their needs. And if we don't, we need to be honest and say that. Because what happens, the plant manager is disgusted with himself because he can't serve the customer. The salespeople are upset because they're spending all their time dealing with the problems. And you're creating division in the team. If you're not capable, just make sure we understand. And it's not, you know, that's really important. And that's in manufacturing anyway. You know, do what you're capable of doing in your wheelhouse. If you get outside your wheelhouse, it becomes very challenging unless you change the capabilities, which is back to giving those teams the ability to meet your customers' needs. And if you don't, you should make a decision not to participate. It's a hard thing to do, fire a customer because you're not good enough. But that happens.
All right, given where we're at time-wise, probably have time for maybe one more question, maybe two, depending on. length of the question and length of the answer, but any other questions we have out there tonight? Nope. Sure. Okay.
So regarding leadership, what is a lesson that you have learned that you wish you would have learned much sooner, and how would that have affected you both professionally and personally?
Yeah, I mean, I think early on I was very ambitious to reach certain stages in my career, positions. And I got to the point probably because I matured, or partly because I realized, hey, the opportunities to move up professionally become limited. So I quit thinking about that selfishness. I got to get to the next job. 5 years, I got to be here. The next 5 years, I got to be this job. Next 5 years, I got to be here. And just said, listen, what do I love to do? And I love to build. You heard, I told you what I love to do. Love to build teams. I love to compete to win. I love to develop people. That's what I love to do. And if I'm doing that, I'm going to be really satisfied regardless of the job I'm in. And it's interesting, when I took that mindset as a leader, my career took off at a much faster pace than have this maniacal focus on I'm going to go after the next job. So I think when I did that, I was probably a little more self-centered than I needed to be. I've always loved to work as a team. But let's be honest, if you're looking for that next job, you're thinking about you as opposed to the team first. And when you think about what do you love to do, and which is about building a team, developing a team, competing to win, then you're focused on how do you make the team better. And I think that was a transition happened when I was about 40. And I don't know if something just hit me up the side of the head or out of it. That's one thing that I think made a big difference in my life. And I was actually a lot happier every day. I went into work because I had a purpose of what I wanted to achieve. Hello, Susan. Did you have a question?
Oh, go ahead.
So now that you are moving on from Greif, why don't you share with us what your next purpose is going to be as a servant leader?
Yeah, so, I retired at 65, not because that's a hard date, and, you're supposed to retire at 65. I have the energy to work another 10 years, and I could have done this job a lot longer, but I want to teach. And you saw my education background, and I really thought I taught and coached, and I thought I was pretty good at it. And I almost feel like I copped out by getting into business. And although you influence and teach and coach people in business, I want to give the next 10 years of my life to teaching in a university setting, mentoring young professionals, and maybe coaching. I told my wife maybe I'll coach a high school girls basketball team because I have 3 daughters. So I'm going to, give back the things I've learned and try to teach and coach and improve young people to, give them an opportunity to improve. So thanks for, that was a setup question, Susan. How long you worked at Greif? You've been around. Yeah, started when you were 12. Good to see you.
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate it. Appreciate the audience members we have here today, the questions that have been asked. It's been fantastic, and appreciate you hanging with us for 2 years. It says it's been the longest prep I think we've had for a lecture series from the center. But thank you. Thank you for your answers. And for those of you that are here, we do have some Waltamate Center items over here to the side. Feel free to take something with you. Feel free to mingle, chat, shake hands. It's nice to actually be physical for once and not solely virtual. So take advantage of it. But thank you for coming in tonight. We appreciate it.
Very much.
Thank you. I'd love to get some photos with Pete, so if anyone wants to take some photos, please come on up.